Hey there, Heather, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond welcoming you to yet another Cutter Degrassism to do with the Degrassi universe. And of course, the Degrassism is just a general Degrassi video without any certain themes like, time stands still, the whole season 4 thing, and unpopular opinion. But this is a thing. I went back in time because I was trying to see, I remembered I was at 194 Degrassisms and I wanted to celebrate my 200th with a special one for October the 12th, that being the anniversary of Time Stand Still. I mean, it's Time Stand Still anniversary in Canada, and I know that there's some American Redditors and all that. That's a Time Stand Still didn't happen that day. It didn't in the States, it did in Canada because it was almost always first time run in Canada. But nevertheless, there's a character I never did a case study on. I know that the case studies are like 3, 4 years ago, but there's one I kind of did not want, uh, I couldn't have done. And that's kind of stupid. But anyway, this guy basically gets shafted for all the wrong reasons. And, the writers shafted him. Some of the fans may have shafted him. I don't know. And even I have inadvertently shafted him. But basically, Toby Isaacs needs to be talked about in such a way that we got to do something about it. So anyway, let's talk about Toby. And this case study is entitled Toby We Hardly Knew Ye. It's all the writer's fault. So, what do you want to know about Toby Isaacs? I know you probably want to know a lot about Toby, and I don't blame you one iota for wanting to know why Toby is who he is and why he ended up being what he ended up being by season 7. So, anyway, in season 1, Toby appears as a kid who just moved to the Toronto area and would be going to Degrassi Community School, which at the time was a middle school for grades 6, 7, 8, and then they would transition to high school. But of course, season 2, Degrassi turned into a high school. Nevertheless, Toby made fast friends with JT. Well, they were both at a summer camp, and Toby does act like the voice of reason when Emma is being catfished by Jordan, basically saying that an internet stranger and all that could be dangerous. And Emma blows him off by saying, he's not a stranger. I've known him longer than I've known you. So, of course, we all know that Emma is just living in a fantasy world. But anyway, Toby is the voice of reason and uses his computer hacking skills to hack into the computer that Emma and Spike share and find out about Emma's emails and all that. And where they're meeting at the motel. So, anyhow, thanks to them, well, him, JT, and Manny going to Snake and Spike, they find the perp. They get Jordan before he gets Emma and all that. Toby then in the second ever episode, well, the first ever episode was a two-part. It was a 1 hour episode, but anyhow, in the first non-hour episode, we find out about Toby's family dynamic with Ashley, that they're a blended family, that Ashley's mom and Toby's dad get married and all that. Toby's mom, I don't know what much about her, but I think she found a new boyfriend because in Parents' Day, Toby talks about his family dynamic. And then, of course, Ashley's dad ends up coming out of the closet to Ashley in season 1. So anyway, they try to fight each other off. Ashley decides to become student council president and runs for it. And Toby convinces JT to run to try to screw Ashley. I mean, the wedding had to happen recently, and Toby and Ashley have to find each other. They have to be good to each other and all that. So that's what ends up happening. And, they finally get a dynamic. They finally understand each other. In season 1, it was basically Toby and Ashley as breakout stars and all that, basically trying to outstage the protagonist, Emma. Unfortunately, though, past season 2 was terrible. I mean, Toby had some moments in season 1, not a whole lot. Especially, well, one was Parents' Night, in which he didn't want his parents to attend because obviously they hate each other and there's a divorce thing. So Toby tries to forge some documents to prevent them from happening, but it didn't happen. And then Toby realizes that he has to step up academically, and he is affected by their divorce and all that. Snake, of course, punishes him for forging the documents, but then basically tells Toby, you did the right thing by coming forward to your parents about things. In season 2, Toby actually finds a crush, a girl named Kendra who likes anime just as much as he does. And he actually creepily looks at Kendra several times and all that. Kendra agrees to be his girlfriend, but Toby decides to be a perp in a sense and, shadow Kendra and basically keep his eyes on Kendra and tries to prevent Kendra from breaking up with him because he has this feeling that Kendra wants to break up with him. Kendra tells Toby, I need my space. We'll be fine and all that. Toby goes through a lot of hoops to be with Kendra and all that. And of course, he gets threatened by Spinner because Kendra is Spinner's sister, well, adopted sister in essence. And logically, Spinner wants to break Toby if he breaks Kendra. So, you know, Toby Toby's affection with Kendra was that, he wanted to join the wrestling team to try to make himself not be a nobody. Unfortunately, though, it leads to a male eating disorder, which was rarely talked about at all in most media, in a sense. And, Toby was trying to impress Kendra, trying to be popular and all that. Unfortunately, he ended up taking a pratfall, collapsing while wrestling. He ends up in the hospital. He ends up losing his spot on the wrestling team because he cut weight, meaning he was a lower weight because he would have been in Sean's weight group. But, there were students that were concerned about him, even Sean. And JT tells Toby that Kendra was worried about him and says that, now do you feel unpopular, Tobes? And Toby realizes he went about things the wrong way. And of course, the whole Toby Kendra thing is Toby may be sheltering Kendra, but there may have been a backstory. The fact with Toby's parents and them hating each other, that Toby, I think, was scared that Kendra was going to leave him. And, he wanted to keep a relationship because his family's relationship is sour and, his parents have divorced. I think it's some kind of internal struggle with Toby. Unfortunately for Toby, um, he and Kendra were an item, but by season 3, Kendra was seen less and less and less. And then season 4, off screen, Toby says that he and Kendra broke up over the summer. Of course, the real story about Kendra, aka Katie Lai, was that she was being bullied by certain members of the cast and maybe the crew. And so she and this girl who played Nadia on the show actually had to eat alone and all that. And I think that she didn't want to go back. And conveniently, there was a rumor that there was going to be some kind of episode to do with sex, and Katie Lai's mother pulled her from the show. So that may have been it too. But yeah, Toby trying to find a love interest was huge and all that. Um, season 3, him and JT grow apart. JT tries to grow towards Paige's clique, and Toby is just basically by himself, pushed to the background, if you will. And then Toby decides to inadvertently out JT's wet dream thing to Paige's clique. I think in a way to try to get JT back, like literally back, so that they could be friends again. I mean, Toby was reliant on JT as a friend, it seemed. And it was like horrible that they didn't give and Toby many friends outside of it. He was charming towards Liberty at times and Emma. But, season 3 just didn't sit right with me, how he was shafted. And then season 4 pops up in the picture. Of course, he and Kendra break up because of Katie Lie's leaving the show. So basically, Toby needed to find somebody. He gets involved in JT's penis pump scheme and all that. And then Toby ends up being on the Wacky Brain quiz team and partnered with Rick on an assignment in a season 4 episode. And that's when Toby and Rick both realize that they're much alike. They like girls, they like role playing dice, and so they have a kissing competition to see who wins. And the winner has to get role-playing dice that the loser must provide. So basically, Toby ends up winning the kissing bet easily, as no one wants to kiss a psycho. So Toby, feeling bad about it, decides to pay Darcy $5, and this was one of Darcy's first appearances on Degrassi. And Darcy does kiss Rick. Unfortunately, Toby now is in the grasp of Spinner and Jay, so Raph, and all that. So anyway, Toby ends up being Rick's basically only friend and all that. Although Rick sees Emma, Jimmy, and a few other people as friends, but they're just acquaintances, more like. Toby, even though that he does have a clue of who the heck Rick was, because he was the one who put Terry in the hospital, he still stays with Rick. I think it doesn't take a genius to realize that he's doing it because of the fact that with JT shafting him for the popular group and basically Liberty and Danny, he has nobody to be around. So, of course, Toby's part of the Wacky Brain team, and then he gets beaten up by Spinner and Jay, who want to get Rick back for spray painting their cars because they know who if they did it. He did it, and Toby refuses to give them information. He has a busted lip and all that, and that's when Jimmy finally realizes from Rick that Rick is suffering, and now they have a new target, and that's Toby. They're basically going to hurt Toby to get to Rick. And then Jimmy decides to switch sides, which pisses off Jay, Spinner, and Alex. And I think in the back of their minds, they just wanted Jimmy to suffer for switching sides. Fight me on it. But nevertheless, this is about Toby. So Toby is uncomfortable, especially in the scene in which Rick is getting ready for the Wacky Brain competition via his mother. And then Rick says that he and Toby are going to rule the school and all that. And Toby is a little uncomfortable with how Rick is portraying them as friends and all that, and agrees with everything. And then, of course, Toby hears that Rick could have gone to another school, but Rick wanted to. So, anyhow, Toby's a little bit uncomfortable. Of course, Toby is on the Wacky Brain team with Emma, and we'll talk about the Toby Emma dynamic later. But, Toby sees Rick get pained and feathered and all that, and is uncomfortable at all that. He basically tells everyone that they'll have to cut out that paint and feathers thing for the TV show, and that everything happens and all that. He's upset that JT's laughing at the paint and feathers, even though Toby doesn't think that's funny. So Toby ends up with Sean and Emma, and they walk inadvertently into Rick, who, after shooting Jimmy, calmly walks towards those three and wants to destroy Emma for ruining him. Toby tries to talk some sense into Rick, but fails miserably. Sean talks some sense into Rick, but Rick says it's too late. He's got someone. Toby, all he does is yell, "Stop!" And then the gunshot goes off. Toby then gets interviewed by a policeman and basically doesn't understand why Rick would do such a thing like that. Toby finds out that Rick dies via Rachel, the nosy reporter, and all that. So he's grief stricken. And then, of course, they talk about that stuff on the news when the Simpsons, like Emma and her family, spend time with the Isaacs. And Toby slams everything down. And Ashley wants to know what type of creep would do such a thing to Jimmy. And Emma says, that was Toby's friend. Toby, of course, wrestles with the fact that he was friends with a psycho like Rick. And it doesn't help that JT and Danny blast him for it, and that people kind of ignore Toby about things because, they know Toby was Rick's only kind friend. And Toby is expected to go to the visitation/funeral for Rick because, he has to face Rick's mom. So he doesn't know how to face it. He does let loose on Manny about his problems and how JT is treating him like garbage. Manny takes it upon herself to tell JT that Toby is fiercely loyal because if JT did not push Toby aside, he would have Toby as an ally, and Toby would definitely not be close to Rick. JT realizes that Manny's right, goes to the visitation to help Toby grieve his problems, and basically says that it should never have happened anyway. So anyhow, I didn't talk about Toby's unrequited love interest towards Emma. I know we talk about Rex, but what about Toby? Toby actually did have a crush on Emma for the first few seasons of the show, and even put Emma high up on the kissing list because he kind of felt he and Emma belonged. And then they had the embrace at the end of Time Stands Still and all that. And Toby, yeah, it's weird how Emma was on the quiz show with Jimmy, and then two boys that actually had a lust for her. In essence, and this is my opinion, is that if Toby actually did something about it and stopped Rick and from everything and became kind of a hero and all that, I think Emma would have been drawn to Toby. Emma would have been. What if it was Toby instead of Sean who inadvertently killed Rick? Then maybe Emma would have gravitated towards Toby because we all know Emma gravitated towards Sean for one reason, and that was because he saved her life. I mean, if Toby had saved her life, she probably would go after him, and Toby would have won out. He would have got Emma. I think for sure that Emma Nelson and Toby Isaacs would have been a relationship. I mean, even if it's like only for a few episodes, it's still a relationship. It counts. I think Toby wanted Emma so badly. But the fact of the matter is that it didn't happen. So Emma aside, Toby now has to struggle with things, and JT finally gravitates towards Toby again, and Toby feels great. Unfortunately, season 5, Toby and JT's relationship hits bad as JT wants money to help the kid out and to get out of the drug deal. And Toby says, I can't touch my bonds. My mom would kill me. And JT says, and that's why you have few friends. It's just terrible how JT treated Toby like crap and all that. Toby hung on to JT because he didn't have anything else. I mean, what else in season 5 happened with him? I don't remember. I know in season 6, he was beaten up by Lakehurst people who needed a target after, they couldn't find JT, so they went after Toby because of the whole Degrassi Lakehurst thing, because JT just happened to date Mia, who was Nick's ex, and Nick was the leader of the Degrassi Mafia. I mean, Lakehurst Mafia, if you will. So poor Toby is stuck in the middle of that battle and all that. And then, of course, at the party at Emma's house in Rock This Town, JT laments to Toby about the choice between a meatball sub, that being Mia, and oatmeal Liberty. Are you serious? Like, food shouldn't be sexist or racist, but it seems to be. Nevertheless, Toby tells JT to chase after Liberty because you got to chase after the one you care about. And JT says, You're right, Tobes. What's the worst that can happen? Well, we all know that story. He gets stabbed by Drake Lampley and game set match. And Toby actually gets the hospital to tell him this stuff because he pretends to be JT's brother, whereas JT's grandmother is on her way to the hospital and is not there yet. So JT's brother, as JT's brother in a sense. Well, I mean, it makes sense. He learns that JT died because it stabbed his aorta and he was gone. And then him, Manny, Emma, and Sean embrace. And I think Liberty too. So the next episode, Toby actually comes close to Liberty and all that. And I think it was more trauma bonding. I know that technically that is actually a different term, and you bond over bad things happening to them and all that, like massive trauma. But the fact of the matter is that in my version of trauma bonding, they bonded over JT's death. Manny and not Manny, Liberty and Toby. So Toby aside, he kind of has a thing for Liberty. I mean, Danny even sees that and pokes fun at him for that. But simply put, Toby felt great. Of course, Toby decides at the end to tell Liberty and Mia, for that matter, that JT went out of the party to search for Liberty, not Mia. And all that, causing a little bit of problems. The fact of the matter is that Toby just couldn't keep the secret and couldn't hurt his dead friend. So he had to do JT some service, if you will. And a lot of people actually said that Toby should have kept everything to himself because maybe he would have got Liberty and maybe would have got a good relationship. But no, he couldn't do that. I mean, come on, it's Toby. So unfortunately, it seemed that the writers were punishing him for doing the right thing because what good storylines did Toby get for the rest of season 6? Nothing. At the start of season 7, he was in, of course, the subplot of the episode. Crap, I can't remember. The season 7 premiere. The subplot was that Lakers had to move into Degrassi because their school burned down on a fire. People kind of maybe think Jay did it or some Degrassi person did it as revenge, or, maybe the school had a bad central system. Nevertheless, Toby is upset that Lakers is coming, obviously because they killed JT. So Toby gets beaten up, but then Toby realizes that he can't do harm. He goes to JT's grave and says that violence against violence is just not the answer, and realizes it, and writes in his and does a school podcast, and basically says that maybe the Lakers people are friends you haven't met, and tries to calm down the Lakers Degrassi situation, which kind of works in a sense. Toby realizes that he can't be that bad of a person. So then Toby doesn't get much storylines until the end of season 7 in We Built This City, which is the season, which kind of was supposed to be the Degrassi send off in a sense, because 7 seasons CTV was probably going to cancel it, but then they added a few more seasons and all that. Of course, I'm talking Canadian, my Canadian butt. But the fact of the matter is that Toby ends up going with Liberty to the prom in a sense. No, yeah, Toby is Liberty's date for the prom and all that, and then finds out that Liberty is not willing to talk to him about JT's death and all that, and you know, and then is really upset when he finds out through Damien that he and Liberty are having a secret fling behind Emma's back because Emma was supposed to be with Damien. Of course, I think a lot of people didn't want Emma to be with Damien because the only reason why Emma seemed to be with Damien was because she needed a rebound after Sean left for the army and all that. I don't think Damien and Emma would have worked out, but Emma, even though she hated Damien and all that and Lakehurst, she lowered her standards. I think she was just doing it because she needed a boyfriend. And also, let's not forget that Damien did get Emma's hopes up in the Purple Dragon thing, calling her boring and bland, and then Emma decides to try to prove to people she is not predictable. Although I think she kind of tells Manny and all that, do you think I'm predictable? Huh? Huh? Nevertheless, as I said, I'm getting a little bit off topic. So Toby then decides to spill the tea, if you will, and tells about Damien's relationship with Manny and with Liberty, and Damien is bragging about it. Of course, Emma is upset, more so at Damien than Liberty, and saying she couldn't break off a 6-year friendship with Liberty over being petty. Well, the writers screwed up because Emma and Liberty, A, were not really friends, and B, season 4, remember when Emma was upset that Liberty would take Chris because what would that do for Emma's well-being? And it's like, what the hell? You don't care about what people think when you do your stupid causes. So anyway, Toby, alongside Manny and Emma, tell Liberty that everyone's entitled to mistakes and all that. Manny says she's made plenty of them. Emma, too. And then Toby is happy that JT gets honored. And then the poignant scene in which Emma, Liberty, Toby, and Manny are out of the picture for JT York Memorial Garden. And then they have a graduation cap and they turn the tassel saying that he graduated with them. That's great. He does come back for a few, I think, one episode in season 8 as a Robot Wars host, and then season 9 he was apparently back in the wedding scene that that Emma and Spinner were married. But we all know it was a double. It was nowhere near what Toby looked like. But of course, the worst part about this was how shafted Toby seemed to be in season 7. Yes, he got a few good storylines. But the fact of the matter is, by season 7, he wasn't even in the opening credits. He was not in the opening credits sequence and all that. Many characters were. There were a few Lakers guys that got in. But where was Toby? Basically, Toby's name had to be put into the also starring part of the credits. Toby was massively shafted and all that. Sure, he got some good storylines, but it feels like they were putting Toby in the background. The first season and a bit, He was prominent. He was almost ready to break out and overshadow Emma. But no, the writers didn't want that. All they wanted was Toby to be this geeky perv, if you will. Lots of people have been saying how creepy Toby was. I agree in a sense, but I mean, the guy was desperately looking for a relationship because his family dynamic sucked. And, internally he wanted to be better. Gotta give him that. Please give him that. Anything. Anything. Regardless of that, Toby really deserved better and all that. He got shafted by the writers so many times he can count. He got shafted by JT. He kind of got shafted by Liberty. He got shafted by Emma. They just love to shaft this guy. And it's just pure stupidity. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.